Well, we're back. Spent my time trying to clear off the learning glass. The ink that's on there doesn't come off very easily, but eventually you get it clean, and then we're back in business. For you, it's just like having surgery. You get put to sleep, you wake up, nothing happened. So in the middle here, we had some surgical procedure that was going on this board. So last time we talked about we're going to be talking about statistical methodology and statistical concepts and terms. So here's a brief description of statistical methodology. So how does statistics actually work? What do you have to do? It's important to see this because lots of times people want to just start with number 2 here. I'll just collect some data and see what happens. And that's really the wrong way to go about it. So if you have something you want to study, you spend some time before you start going out in the field and collecting information to identify your research question. What exactly matters to you? So what is it that you want to know? And you have to be pretty careful about that. And a lot of times, this is a place where you want to be talking to somebody who's a research expert, a statistical expert. You have a question, but you're not exactly sure how to go forward, what kind of analysis you're going to do, and they could maybe help you out. What statistical process, method will work here? So once you know what you want to study, you might decide, well, okay, then I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply this experimental design or this sampling technique, and then I know what to do next. I'll go either collect the data or run the experiment. Now, what happens lots of times is once you've got your data, it's interesting. The stuff that you collect oftentimes doesn't match what you expected to see. So you do a brief, usually a graphical display of the data to make sure it looks like what you expected it to look like, and lots of times it doesn't. And so each statistical method you might employ might have certain conditions that the data has to obey before you can use it to draw any conclusions. And it's possible that the method and the data aren't compatible, and you have to now change over to some other method and regroup. And that might be a matter of actually changing your question a little bit, to changing your statistic a little bit now that you see what your population looks like, because you're probably trying to analyze the population by collecting a sample. You don't know exactly what the values are in the population. So once you've collected some data and looked at it, you go, oh, I see what's going on. I think I know what to do now. So it makes sense to run like a pilot study. And then once the pilot study is done, before you go full-blown into the analysis of a very expensive procedure, that you make sure that this looks like it's going to work and give you the answers you want. Okay, so once you've determined whether that's compatible and made adjustments that are necessary, so maybe my pen doesn't work, make adjustments. Like that. Then go ahead and do it. Perform the analysis, state the results. So you want to worry about limitations. There'll be limitations to your analysis based on how big the sample is you collected, and exactly things that can go wrong along the way that you discover as you're doing the experiment or you're collecting the data, that maybe some of the ways of measurement weren't as accurate as you thought, or if you're asking questions of individuals, maybe the questions have been misinterpreted. Maybe you have to go back and say, well, it looks to me from the way that the questions have been answered that they may not have understood the questions I was asking. That's another reason to run a pilot study. They'll do focus groups, and they'll ask the participants, when they're asking questions, what questions do you think we're asking you? Because it might not be the one that you think you're asking them. So briefly, the first one, what do you want to find out? How you proceed, collect the data, examine the data for suitability, analyze and state results. Okay, so 4 things. So my research question that I wanted to investigate is this: do organic apples have a pesticide on them? Okay. So you go to the store, you see those things labeled organic. That's my question. What I'm going to do, I'm thinking, is we'll collect some apples. Okay, so we'll get some apples, collect organic apples, peel them, and then we'll test just the peels. That's what I'm thinking, that possibly if this pesticide's floating around the supposedly organic orchard, that we might find it. Maybe it blows from another orchard nearby, or maybe they're actually spraying the apples with some kind of pesticide, and they're telling you that it's organic. Maybe it's an organic pesticide. I don't know what that means. But okay, organic. What does organic mean? It should mean no pesticide, but it might not mean that to some people. So we're gonna. That's my question. So that's one. And two, looks like we get the peels, and then look at the chemical analysis. So maybe you want to run it through some kind of fancy machine, like a mass spectrometer or something like that. You have to do something with the peels. Maybe you pulverize them and then take a small piece and stick it in a machine, and it'll tell you what chemicals are in there. And you have certain ones you're looking for that are pesticides, so they should have certain signatures, so you might be able to find it. Look at the chemical analysis and then try to decide, is there pesticide there, and so on. And we should know then, what are we going to do? Determine how much pesticide. Like that, determine how much pesticide. And you might realize at the end of the day, wait a second, is that a lot of pesticide? You probably find something on there. How much we were thinking, and how much would you get if you're on the peels, and if you eat them, how much would you get in your body? What's the big deal here? And maybe we've been better off checking to see whether organic apples have a lot less pesticide on them than regular apples. But now we just changed our experimental question, in which case we would collect organic apples and regular apples, peel them, get the peels, analyze the peels from both groups, and see if the chemical composition seems to be different. And that'd be a whole different question, maybe a better question, because maybe you find a small amount of pesticide on these apples, and you don't know really how much, if that's a lot or a little, and you would know that if you could compare how much of that compared to apples that aren't organically grown. So that's how things kind of can unfold as you're carrying out an experiment and doing an analysis. You may change the way you want to look at it based on, well, after the chemical analysis, you realize there's not very much pesticide on there, but maybe there's not much pesticide on regular apples. Maybe I should check, something like that. So there we have it. Another slide seems to be done. So this one didn't have as much information, still quite a bit. And we'll move on from here. So slide 2. So the way this works is I build a, what do they call that, a sequence of videos in YouTube, and then we post that to Blackboard, and you can launch that sequence called a playlist. And you can watch each slide over and over again. You don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't feel like it. And you can skip ahead or skip back if you want, just by jumping from one video to the next. Each video is only as long as this, maybe 5 minutes, maybe sometimes longer if we're doing some problems that take some space. And there we go, 2 down, and I haven't made a count of the total number in the class, but it's a lot.